All right, let's talk about something that pushes the laws of physics, as we know them, to the breaking point. This is a story that starts as a scientific mystery and ends like something out of an Arthur C. Clarke novel. Think back to 2017. The cosmos threw a curveball at us. An object appeared that we named Oumuamua, the messenger from afar. We physicists first thought, aha, a comet or an asteroid. It was the simple, elegant explanation. But nature loves surprises. This rock started to accelerate. With no tail, no outgassing. It was moving as if it had its own engine. Think about that. It's like seeing a rock on the road suddenly start rolling uphill on its own. Its shape, elongated like a cigar or a needle, was unlike anything in our catalog of cosmic objects. My colleague, the brilliant Harvard astrophysicist Avi Loeb, dared to say out loud what many were thinking in whispers. What if it's not a rock? What if it's technology? It was a revolutionary idea. And you know what? To this day, no model based on natural causes can 100% explain Oumuamua's behavior. It remains an anomaly, the first hint that we might not be alone. Now, fast forward 6 years. The story is repeating itself, but this time it's louder, clearer, and frankly, a lot more disturbing. The James Webb Telescope, our sharpest eye on the universe, spotted a new visitor. We've named it Triad Atlas. And if Oumuamua was a whisper in the dark, Atlas is a scream. This object is bigger, faster, and its behavior, it's intelligent. It's trying to disguise itself as a comet, creating a cloud around it, but its emissions are too orderly. This isn't a chaotic burst of gas. It's a structured signal. It reflects light like ice, but its heat map screams, "There's a mechanism here." The heat isn't distributed like on a block of ice, but like on a running engine. But the most stunning part is its trajectory. This isn't a random flight. It's a grand tour of our solar system. It's moving as if on rails, down an invisible cosmic highway, hitting key gravitational points as if it has a schedule. We scientists always look for the simplest explanation. But what if the simplest explanation is that the object is acting intelligently because it is intelligent? The probability of this trajectory being random is less than 1/100%. In physics, that means impossible. And this is where it gets unsettling. It's one thing to have a random interstellar wanderer. It's another thing entirely to have a planned visit. In the corridors of NASA and the European Space Agency, there's a palpable tension. Memos are starting to use words that would make any old-school scientist's hair stand on end. Artificial, deliberate, and one word keeps popping up. A word that would have once sounded like science fiction. Espionage. Spying on who? On us? Think about it. We're a young civilization on the verge of becoming a planetary Type 1 civilization on the Kardashev scale. We're playing with nuclear energy, exploring space. Maybe for someone out there, we've become interesting. There are two main hypotheses. The first, optimistic one, Atlas is a cosmic time capsule, a messenger from a long-dead civilization, a kind of message in a bottle floating through the cosmic ocean. But there's another, darker version. This isn't a relic. It's an active probe, sent recently. Its purpose? To observe, analyze, and perhaps assess. And that turns everything on its head. Since Galileo, we've been the observers. We've looked through telescopes, studied the stars. We are the universe's eyes, looking back at itself. But what if, all this time, the universe has been looking back at us? What if, right now, we are being cataloged, measured, and analyzed? The question is no longer, are we alone in the universe? The question is, what happens when we realize we have neighbors, and they're already on our doorstep? This changes everything. Absolutely everything. The awkwardness deepens when you remember Atlas didn't just stumble into our telescopes. it made an entrance. A strangely convenient one. Its closest approach to Earth happens just when our planet is hidden behind the sun, making it invisible to most ground-based observatories. Whether a miscalculation or a deliberate choice, like a burglar leaving through the back door knowing which camera is off, this detail creates a tension between what our physics knows and what our intuition suspects about intent. If it's natural, it's a monumental coincidence. If it's not, we're dealing with an intelligence that has actively evaded detection. Science has always struggled with assigning intent to cosmic phenomena. We call the mania of projecting purpose onto astronomical events anthropocentrism. But here, the object's very behavior forces us to consider intent as a valid hypothesis. How do you explain symmetrically distributed heat patterns, rhythmic pulses of radiation, and trajectory changes that defy gravitational explanations? This isn't speculation anymore. This is hard data from the most advanced instruments ever built. The James Webb, designed to look at the farthest galaxies, has now become a witness to something that seems to be looking back at us. And this is where the narrative thread gets even more unsettling. If Oumuamua was just the prologue, Atlas is chapter 2, and chapters rarely come alone. The words of Avi Loeb echo again. We shouldn't assume we're alone just because we lack definitive proof. The absence of evidence is not evidence of absence. That phrase, once seen as an academic provocation, now feels like a warning. Atlas is getting closer. That's not a hypothesis. It's a fact. It's cutting through space at over 200,000 kilometers per hour, approaching our corner of the universe with a precision no known comet can achieve. With every course correction, with every energy pulse captured, the idea of cosmic randomness crumbles. We're left not with the question of whether it's natural or artificial, but why it's here. And if the history of science has taught us anything, it's that questions like these never have simple answers. They shatter paradigms, they disrupt our comfort, and they force us to stare into the abyss of what we do not yet understand. Meanwhile, in the middle of the debate, a feeling of unease grows like a shadow. We didn't find it. It let us find it. And if Atlas is not an act of nature, but an act of purpose, the real question isn't what it is, but who is behind it. And the answer to that may lie far beyond what we are prepared to hear. The impossible route. It was dawn when the Vera C. Rubin Observatory in Chile captured the transit of Triad Atlas. At first, it was just another routine log, a blurry image, a light signature that betrayed something moving too fast against the static backdrop of stars. Astronomers, accustomed to the constant stream of comets and asteroids visiting our neighborhood, cataloged the object, gave it a preliminary classification as a comet, and moved on. But it only took an hour for the alarms to sound. The problem wasn't just its speed, over 210,000 kilometers per hour, but the trajectory Atlas was carving. Unlike traditional comets, which follow elongated, wobbly orbits shaped by gravitational forces, this object seemed to have a flight plan, a straight, clean, unwavering line, piercing the solar system toward its core. What should have been a wandering rock was behaving like a spacecraft on a mission. That realization sent an immediate jolt through the scientific community. The phrase repeated in universities, observatories, and simulation labs was, "This makes no sense." The probability of such a trajectory being purely random was calculated at less than 1/100%. It was the equivalent of flipping a coin 1,000 times and getting the same result every single time. Statistics, science's coldest tool, was screaming intent. And this is where the transformation begins, not just of science, but of society. Imagine you're driving down a deserted road. You expect to see birds, maybe an animal crossing. Now imagine a strange car suddenly appears behind you, matching your speed with surgical precision, mirroring every turn, always staying the exact same distance away. Would you call it a coincidence? For a few minutes, maybe? But after a few miles, the only logical conclusion would be, someone is following you. This was the feeling among astronomers. Atlas wasn't just an object entering the solar system. It was following a route that passed specific points of interest: Jupiter, Mars, and Earth. Each approach, each maneuver, felt more like a surveillance path than a random flight. This discovery alone would have been enough to shake the public, but there was something even more disturbing. At its point of closest approach, Earth will be behind the Sun, rendering it invisible to our ground-based telescopes. A cosmic coincidence, or a way to stay hidden at the most critical moment? NASA, pressured by this anomaly, turned the James Webb Space Telescope, the crown jewel of modern astronomy, toward it. The Webb doesn't just see invisible light. It captures infrared, revealing details hidden from the human eye. What it found only deepened the anxiety. Atlas did have a dark, reflective surface, typical of a comet rich in carbon and ice. But beneath that shell were anomalies, rhythmic radiation pulses, repeating like a signal, a uniform heat distribution, inconsistent with the chaotic spin of space rocks, and micro-reflections with geometric shapes, suggesting smooth surfaces hidden under the dust. It wasn't definitive proof of technology, but it wasn't the signature of randomness either. Science found itself at a crossroads. Continue treating Atlas as a natural body and risk ignoring blatant evidence, or open the door to the hypothesis that something intelligent was behind its trajectory. For most people, space is a distant spectacle, confined to newspaper headlines or colorful photos NASA releases. But Atlas, while invisible to the naked eye, began to seep into daily conversations. In economics, analysts started discussing the impact of a potential confirmation of intelligent life on sectors like technology, defense, and even space tourism. Private companies dreaming of colonizing Mars would have to grapple with the idea that we're not the only ones exploring it. In politics, the silence from space agencies bred distrust. Online forums exploded with speculation about a government cover-up. In religion, spiritual leaders were asked what it meant for their faith to know we are not alone. Some traditions saw it as a confirmation of ancient prophecies, others as a threat to human centrality. In daily life, people started looking up at the sky with a mix of awe and unease. The cosmos, once a distant backdrop, now felt active, capable of intervening in our lives. The situation is comparable to the moment humanity realized, centuries ago, that it was not the center of the universe. The Copernican revolution dethroned the Earth, turning it into just another planet orbiting the sun. It was a philosophical, cultural, and even spiritual shock. Now, Atlas seems to be forcing another leap. We are not just another planet. We are an observed planet. Another parallel is with the history of aviation. When hot air balloons and airplanes began crossing borders without warning, nations realized they no longer controlled the skies above them. Similarly, Atlas is crossing our space without asking permission, reminding us that our cosmic sovereignty is a fragile illusion. At the heart of this discovery is not a scientific struggle, but an emotional one. Humans have always dreamed of not being alone in the universe. But dreaming it is not the same as facing it. We want contact, but we don't want surveillance. We want proof of life, but we don't want the feeling of being analyzed like rats in a cosmic laboratory. This is the impression Atlas gives. Not one of friendship, not one of open war, but one of cold, calculated observation. The psychological impact is already palpable. An informal poll on astronomy forums revealed that for many, the mere thought of Atlas being artificial is anxiety-inducing. Parents report their children asking if the aliens have arrived yet. Travel companies report cancellations due to a fear of the unknown. Science, once a symbol of stability and rational explanation, is now a bearer of uncertainty. And when not even the scientists have clear answers, the world feels that uncertainty twice as hard. Perhaps the most provocative point is this. Atlas isn't just observing us, it's forcing us to look at ourselves. If a technology exists that can cross interstellar distances with millimeter precision, what does that say about us? We are still fighting over borders, arguing about resources, and even questioning the validity of science itself. Meanwhile, something, or someone, may be studying us as if we are still a primitive civilization. It's a clash between external grandeur and internal pettiness. The real earthquake atlas is triggering is not just astronomical, it's psychological, cultural, and existential. This is the point where the narrative stops being distant and speaks directly to you, the viewer. Because this isn't just about orbital telescopes or secret NASA reports. It's about how each of us confronts the unknown. Have you ever wondered what you would do if you knew you were being watched? Would you change your behavior, trying to look better? Or would you shut down, afraid of being judged? Atlas is giving us that choice, unexpectedly. And here is a simple request. If this story resonates with you, if it inspires you, worries you, and makes you curious, don't let this reflection be wasted. Subscribe to the channel, like this video, and share it. Not for an algorithm, but because together, we are building a narrative that goes beyond entertainment. It's a preparation for a future that is already knocking at our door. Because the question is no longer just scientific, it's personal. If Atlas is approaching us with such precision, we have to ask ourselves what it is looking for in us. The answer could redefine not just the future of science, but the future of humanity itself. The Watcher Hypothesis. When Oumuamua crossed the solar system in 2017, leaving a trail of confusion, its anomalous acceleration, strange shape, and lack of any cometary activity sparked a wave of interpretations. The boldest came from Avi Loeb, the Harvard astrophysicist. He suggested the object could be an artificial probe, a kind of alien solar sail. The idea was heavily criticized as overly speculative. However, with the arrival of Triad Atlas, those who once mocked Loeb have begun to reconsider his arguments. This time, the evidence isn't just anomalous, it's forming a pattern. Atlas exhibits features that echo Oumuamua, but are taken to a new level. It doesn't just accelerate strangely, it adjusts its speed in response to areas of intense radiation. It doesn't just reflect light irregularly, it emits rhythmic pulses of radiation, repeating at a precise interval. It doesn't just follow an unusual trajectory, it's on a route that passes through strategic points in the solar system, as if it's gathering data at each stop. How do you explain this behavior without resorting to artificial hypotheses? How long can you maintain scientific caution when the evidence seems to pile up in the same direction? Some analysts have started using a term that circulates cautiously in internal reports, the Watcher Hypothesis. According to this view, Atlas is not a disguised comet, but an interstellar sentry designed to observe emerging civilizations. This hypothesis is not supported by definitive proof, but by an accumulation of data that fits no known category of celestial body. It's worth remembering that the idea of cosmic probes watching the cosmos is not new. In the 1960s, astronomer Ronald Bracewell already proposed the existence of messenger probes, artifacts sent by advanced civilizations to monitor other species. These probes would be designed to operate autonomously, respond to stimuli, and report back to their creators. At the time, the concept seemed like science fiction. But with the data from Atlas, Bracewell's theory is once again being debated. If we entertain this hypothesis, the question is not only what Atlas is, but what its purpose is: to observe, to communicate, to test our perception, or simply to log our existence. During the monitoring of Atlas, the Deep Space Network, the global network of antennas responsible for communicating with deep space probes like Voyager, detected something unsettling. A faint, narrow-band signal with regular pulses, resembling a radar signal. There was no message modulation, no interpretable content, just a rhythmic pattern that repeated 3 times and then went silent. Anomalous signals have been detected before, and many have been explained by terrestrial interference or natural phenomena. But the fact that the pulse's origin coincided with the exact location of Atlas raised doubts that were hard to dismiss. Scientists even classified it as a possible emission test, a kind of ping, as if the object were probing its environment or checking to see if it was being noticed. Was it an intentional transmission, or should it be filed away as an unlikely coincidence? The silence that followed was even more disturbing than the signal itself. What does it mean when an object broadcasts briefly and then falls quiet? Another point that adds to the tension is how Atlas hides. Unlike Oumuamua, which came close to Earth, Atlas chose, or appears to have chosen, a moment when our planet will be obscured by the sun during its closest approach. This feature has led some experts to suggest the object might be minimizing its conscious detection. A technical report from the ESA highlights that the object's thermal pattern suggests active temperature control. Unlike comets, which heat and cool unevenly, Atlas seems to distribute energy uniformly, as if it possesses internal mechanisms to mask the fluctuations that could give it away. This isn't proof of technology, but it directly contradicts the natural physics of icy bodies. If Atlas were just a rock, why would it exhibit behaviors that seem more like concealment strategies than physical dynamics? To what extent is our need for conventional explanations preventing us from seeing what the data is already showing? The impact of this hypothesis is not limited to astronomy. In social sciences and philosophy, the debate has gained new momentum. If Atlas is indeed a form of surveillance, it would mean that humanity has ceased to be just an explorer and has become a subject of study. We would be in a role we never anticipated, a species under the observation of an external intelligence. This idea is unsettling. How do we react when we realize we are not alone, when we feel that someone is watching our every move? History shows that societies under constant surveillance develop different behavioral patterns, sometimes more cautious, sometimes more aggressive. What would happen then if we discovered that human civilization itself is under the gaze of a cosmic watcher? Scientists from various fields have spoken out. Theoretical physicist Paul Davies, for example, had already suggested in previous books that if interstellar probes exist, they might be dormant, waiting for signs of technological awakening. This view gains new strength in light of the apparent correlation between Atlas's data and our own observations. At the same time, critics warn that without direct evidence, jumping to conclusions could undermine the credibility of science. However, even skeptics admit that there has never been an object with so many anomalous characteristics recorded simultaneously. We are facing a dilemma. Should we insist on natural explanations that are not fully supported, or should we open ourselves to hypotheses that challenge our comfort zone? The term watcher is not just a metaphor. It carries a profound implication. If Atlas is indeed playing this role, it is more than just an astronomical anomaly. It is a window into a reality where we do not control the cosmic narrative. We, who have always prided ourselves on observing the universe, might be just a tiny part of a larger experiment. This perception changes everything, from how we look at the sky to how we interpret our place in the cosmos. Science, which seeks answers in the silence of space, must now consider the possibility that space is also answering back. Because if Atlas is a watcher, we are not just facing an astronomical discovery. We are facing a presence that is already silently judging us. And the inevitable question is, what exactly is it recording about us? When the first calculations confirmed Triad Atlas's unprecedentedly close approach to Earth, the numbers didn't just stay on the pages of scientific papers. They spread through internal memos at NASA, ESA, and JAXA, sparking discussions that went beyond pure astronomy. For the first time, risk reports began to mention not just physical impact, but psychological, social, and political impact. These documents, mostly confidential, discuss not only Atlas's trajectory, but also how the public would react to the news that an interstellar object was showing signs of active navigation. One detail, revealed by anonymous sources, caught our attention. Among the simulated scenarios were predictions of a sharp increase in collective anxiety, volatility in financial markets, and a decline in trust in public institutions. Does that seem exaggerated? Perhaps not. Historically, astronomical events perceived as omens have caused panic. During the passage of Halley's Comet in 1910, newspapers of the time sold gas masks because it was believed the comet's tail contained deadly substances. Thousands of people fell into despair, and that was just a comet, visible to the naked eye with known natural explanations. Now, imagine a celestial body that behaves as if it's being controlled. A 2019 report from the U.S. National Academy of Sciences on planetary defense already warned, humanity is poorly prepared for cosmic events of unknown origin. The document received little attention, overshadowed by more immediate headlines. However, now, with Atlas, every line reads like a premonition. Transparent communication is vital, but managing public perception could determine whether the anomaly leads to scientific progress or social chaos. Why was this warning ignored? Because it seemed unlikely. Unlikely, like so many other high-risk scenarios. But the unlikely, when it materializes, is often devastating. And Atlas embodies that very unlikeliness made real. How many times has science warned of high-risk threats, only for humanity to choose to ignore them? Think of the warnings about a global pandemic before 2020. The reports were there, but the prevailing sentiment was, it won't happen now. When it did, we were caught off guard. The question is, are we making the same mistake with Atlas? In the 1970s, the Pioneer 10 and 11 probes carried plaques with messages intended for potential extraterrestrial civilizations. They were symbols and images of Earth, designed by Carl Sagan and his team. Notably, internal reports from that time revealed objections from some who feared that broadcasting our location could attract unwanted attention. The fear was dismissed as an exaggeration. Now, facing Atlas, the irony is cruel. We are facing something that seems to be coming to us, uninvited. And the same fears we dismissed decades ago are returning like a ghost. History shows we underestimate the possibility of being watched. Another little-known example. In 1991, an object called the Methuselah star was the subject of controversy after analyses revealed irregularities in its composition and brightness. The hypothesis that it could be an object of some kind of cosmic engineering was quickly dismissed as speculation. However, later studies showed that much of the initial data was simply ignored for lack of an adequate explanation. This tendency to treat the unexplained as an error reflects a human reluctance to admit we don't understand something. Atlas pushes that very boundary. It forces us to treat the unexplained as real data, not a failure. How many times has humanity witnessed something extraordinary and preferred to retreat to the comfort of conventional explanations? How many discoveries have been stifled by the need to maintain the status quo? What if part of our inability to deal with Atlas comes not from the object itself, but from the difficulty of admitting we are not in control? While independent scientists publish analyses showing geometric patterns in the heat signature of Atlas, official sources remain vague. Public statements speak of cometary anomalies, avoiding any mention of deliberate behavior. However, leaked communications suggest otherwise. Emergency meetings are already discussing disaster scenarios. A military response, should the object alter its course for a critical approach, raises an ethical dilemma. Reveal the truth and risk panic, or remain silent and undermine public trust. Both options come at a cost. The first could destabilize entire societies. The second could be seen in the future as an unacceptable act of manipulation. Either way, humanity loses. Atlas's trajectory can be compared to a drone flying over a territory without permission. It doesn't shoot, it doesn't send direct messages, but its presence changes everything. The population is on alert, governments discuss security protocols, and its every move is watched with suspicion. The difference is that, in this case, the drone comes from interstellar space, and we have no idea who is controlling it. This comparison forces us to reflect on how we react to something that is not a direct threat, but, by its nature, changes our perception of security. You don't need an attack to instill fear. Uncertainty is enough. The emotional impact reached a new level when independent observatories confirmed a second, smaller body, unofficially named Echo 9, following the same trajectory as Atlas. Although its movement is more subtle, it mimics the synchronized course corrections. This solidified the idea that Atlas is not an isolated anomaly, but part of a coordinated system. Historically, smaller objects have been recorded accompanying larger ones in binary asteroids. But in this case, the pattern fits nothing known. The companion does not behave like a gravitationally bound satellite, but like a complementary unit, appearing and disappearing intermittently in the infrared spectrum. This discovery raised a disturbing question among experts. Is Atlas just the visible part of something much larger? Are we seeing a network of objects that we are only now beginning to perceive? If one interstellar object is enough to challenge our science, what do two mean? What changes when an exception is no longer unique and begins to form a pattern? And to what extent are we prepared to accept that we may be facing an intelligent system and not just a solitary body? Over the past 20 years, probabilistic calculations suggested that detecting interstellar objects in our vicinity would be a rare event, almost impossible for humanity. Statistics, they said, indicated we would observe something like this only once a century. However, in less than a decade, we have already detected Oumuamua, Comet Borisov, and now Triad Atlas. Does this mean the estimates were wrong, or has something changed? The increase in detections cannot be explained solely by better instruments. The observed frequency clearly contradicts previous models. This discrepancy was noted in scientific papers published in 2021, but received little attention outside academic circles. Today, with Atlas, these papers are resurfacing as evidence that there were already signs of a greater influx of interstellar visitors than we were admitting. What we chose to ignore may now be the key to understanding what is to come. As Atlas approaches, the feeling is that there is no more time for postponement. The debate can no longer be delayed, as each new piece of data chips away at doubt. The presence of Echo 9, the anomalous heat patterns, the silence of organizations, and the ignored reports form a mosaic that points to one conclusion. We are not facing an ordinary phenomenon. The encounter, even without a collision, will be inevitable. The question is no longer whether we will see it up close, but what it will reveal as it passes by Earth. As Triad Atlas, the sentinel asteroid, makes its closest approach to Earth, reflection gives way to an unavoidable conclusion. We are not dealing with a simple interstellar object. The accumulated data, the regular radiation pulses, the trajectory changes that defy purely gravitational explanations, the presence of a second coordinated body, and the sudden silence from certain scientific institutions paint a picture that can no longer be dismissed as coincidence. The discomfort is not just scientific, but in what this discovery means for us as a species. Because understanding Atlas is not just a question of astronomy, it's a question of identity. To ignore Atlas would be to maintain a position of comfort, as we have often done in the past. Like ancient civilizations that saw an eclipse as divine punishment, we could look at this visitor and say, it's just another comet, another rock in the void. But science was not built on denying discomfort. It was built on the courage to face the inexplicable. The mistakes of history are repeated when we do not learn from them. For centuries, humanity refused to accept that the Earth orbited the Sun. Later, it refused to accept the existence of other galaxies beyond the Milky Way. Today, we are refusing to accept that we may not be alone. Not because there is no evidence, but because the implications are too great for our worldview. The question is simple. Will we let fear blind us, or will we have the maturity to acknowledge what the data is already pointing to? Ignoring Atlas does not change its presence. Pretending it's just a comet doesn't alter its trajectory, but it does change our response. The risk of not acknowledging the complexity of the situation turns a learning opportunity into a source of hysteria. If governments and scientists continue to remain silent, that vacuum will be filled with speculation, misinformation, and theories that erode public trust. If scientists refuse to consider uncomfortable hypotheses, we will miss the chance to develop new conceptual tools to understand the universe. And if ordinary people, like you watching this video, choose to look at the sky without seeing what is in front of them, we will be repeating the same mistake as our ancestors, the reluctance to accept our smallness in the face of the unknown. On the other hand, understanding Atlas also has consequences. To accept that we may be facing something artificial is to accept that we are not isolated observers, but part of a much larger cosmic ecosystem. It could shake religions, political systems, and entire economies. We might have to redefine our relationship with security, technology, and even spirituality. Accepting this reality could mean realizing that we are being evaluated, that every radio transmission, every satellite, every act of our civilization is already part of a cosmic archive beyond our control. The uncomfortable question arises, what have we already shown about ourselves? Are we a species capable of dialogue with something superior? Or are we just an immature civilization marked by internal wars and self-destruction? Atlas acts as a mirror. It reflects not only the light of the sun, but also our own condition. It forces us to confront the questions we have avoided for centuries. What does it mean to be human in a universe inhabited by older intelligences? What does progress mean when others are already navigating the stars while we are still fighting for survival on our little blue planet? The discomfort comes not from Atlas itself, but from what it reveals about us. This is the real impact, not realizing we are not alone, but realizing we were never prepared for that truth. So far, we have seen Atlas challenge our scientific explanations, expose the flaws in our institutions, and threaten our sense of self. It is not just a celestial body, it is a civilizational event. For science, it means reconsidering theories and acknowledging profound gaps. For society, it means having to manage collective anxiety and a crisis of confidence in governments and institutions. For the individual, it means confronting the fragility of our personal and spiritual beliefs. Atlas has not only come from space, it has also emerged from within us, from the human desire to look up and understand. But with that desire comes the burden of no longer being able to pretend we are alone on the cosmic stage. We have reached a point of no return. Atlas will pass, leaving its mark, and with it, a new milestone in human history. The question is whether we will be ready to learn from it. This reflection cannot end here. That's why I'm asking you. Subscribe to the channel, like this video, and leave a comment. Not just to support this work, but because dialogue is the only way we can face the depth of these issues together. Building this understanding is not the task of a few scientists, but of an entire community that refuses to live in the shadow of ignorance. Atlas is more than just an interstellar visitor. It is a reminder that the universe does not revolve around our beliefs. It forces us to abandon the comfort of ignorance and take on the responsibility of seeing what has always been there. And when you look up at the sky in the coming nights, remember, not every light is a star. Sometimes it's a distant, silent gaze, recording every step of our existence. Because the question is not whether we are being watched, but what will be done with what has already been seen. And as the clock ticks, the suspense becomes unbearable. When Atlas passes us by, will it continue to just observe, or will it finally reveal itself? Для отдельного человека это означает столкновение с хрупкостью наших личных и духовных убеждений. Атлас не просто пришел из космоса, он также появился изнутри нас, из человеческого желания взглянуть вверх и понять. Но вместе с этим желанием приходит и бремя невозможности больше притворяться одинокими на космической сцене. Мы достигли точки невозврата. Атлас уйдет, оставив свой след, а вместе с ним и новую веху в истории человечества. Вопрос в том, будем ли мы готовы учиться у него. Это размышление не может закончиться здесь. Поэтому я спрашиваю вас, подпишитесь на канал, поставьте лайк этому видео и оставьте свой комментарий. Не только для того, чтобы поддержать эту работу, но и потому, что диалог – единственный способ вместе взглянуть на глубину этих проблем. Формирование такого понимания – задача не отдельных ученых, а целого сообщества, которое отказывается жить в тени невежества. Атлас – это больше, чем просто межзвездный гость. Это напоминание о том, что Вселенная не вращается вокруг наших убеждений. Он заставляет нас отказаться от комфорта невежества и взять на себя ответственность за то, чтобы увидеть то, что всегда было перед нами. И когда вы посмотрите на небо грядущими ночами, помните, не каждый свет – звезда. Иногда это всего лишь далекий, безмолвный взгляд, фиксирующий каждый шаг нашего существования. Потому что вопрос заключается не в том, следят ли за нами, а в том, что будут делать с тем, что уже увидено. И по мере того, как тикают часы, сомнения становятся невыносимыми. Когда Атлас пройдет мимо нас, продолжит ли он просто наблюдать, или же он, наконец, явит себя?